Okay, we are now going to hear from the Elevate Prize Group. I think Carolina is going to introduce all of you. So Carolina Jayaram, a very, very dear friend, a former board member of Guitars Over Guns, probably one of the most passionate artists, art legal minds. She represents and helps the University of Miami in a host of activities around entertainment, the arts, et cetera. And although it's very hard to tell, has actually more than 20 years of doing this, and is really a wealth of understanding the risks of philanthropy. And so it's my great pleasure to bring her up and introduce this very wonderful group called Elevate.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hi, is my mic on? You can hear me, right? Hi. So yes, I'm Carolina Garcia Jayaram, and I'm the CEO of the Elevate Prize Foundation. And I know it's been a very long, inspiring, at certain times terrifying day, the information we've learned today. But all in all, you know, I'm trying to synthesize it all. Honestly, it's a lot to take in, you know, both the opportunity, the threat, and all that's ahead of us. And what really centers me day after day after day are the individual leaders and minds that are going to get us there. And so my whole career has been about uplifting individual entrepreneurs, whether they were artists or now social impact entrepreneurs. So Elevate Prize allows us to do that. And we're really, really proud to have some of our winners here with you today. The synthesis of today really, though, for me is that it's going to take a lot more than money, right? That's what we understand here. It's really going to take each individual person caring and then finding their own agency and having the permission to do something about it. Money's part of it, but it's not all of it. And what's the role that we all have to play, right? What's the way we can do it? And we know that, I believe, as our previous speaker just said, that all the solutions are out there. It's really about creating the pathways and access for the people who can develop those pathways and those solutions. And we believe at the Elevate Prize in shining a light on those entrepreneurs, because so much of what keeps them from realizing their full potential is that they live in the shadows. We don't know about them, right? We know Malala, we know Greta, but there are thousands and thousands more of these social entrepreneurs out there that we believe that with the right attention paid on to them, it will help not only give those of you investors ways to find them and invest in them, but hopefully build the world's first fan base for good. What we are trying to do is make good famous. And so in making good famous, we give permission to all of you to be part of it in all the ways that are meaningful and accessible to you. And so I got to this incredible job and this amazing opportunity by meeting an amazing man who I call a friend, a mentor, my boss, and I want to introduce him. He's Joe Deitch. He comes from the world of finance, but he's done so many more things than that beyond Commonwealth and Advisor 360. He's also an award-winning Broadway producer and an author of a great book called Elevate: An Essential Guide to Life. So before I go on and introduce our panel, I'd love to bring Joe up to say a few words.
So I had remarks for today, and then with each presentation, I crossed them out and put stuff in. I will start with I'll start with vulnerability, which was not part of the prepared remarks. I was in India, in Calcutta, in Mother Teresa's Hospital for the Sick and Dying. The hospital was half the size of this room. The beds, the hospital beds, they were green army cots. Everyone there was a volunteer. And forgive me, it's like I was going through the story in my mind. It's very emotional. On this one particular cot, there was a woman. I just wanted to steal his thunder. There was a woman who was nothing but skin and bones. And he had a little loincloth down below, and on her hand was a very, very thin gold wedding band, different than my Aura thing, which does my, bioenergy, whatever. And she was skin and bones. And the gold ring hinted of a life with children and a husband and who knows what. And next to her was a woman. I learned later she was a nurse from Ireland, and she was stroking her arm. And I spoke to her afterwards, and I said, what do you do for the patients? Why are you stroking her arm like this? And she said, Mother Teresa said to just love them. And that's what she was doing. She was just, with every stroke, she was just loving. So then we went to her orphanage, and Mother Teresa was there. I don't know, those of you who may have met her, the single most motivating person I've ever met in my life. It was a little YPO expedition. There were maybe 6 or 8 of us, some of who were hardened people. And when Mother Teresa stopped speaking, without even looking at each other, we literally dove into our pockets and gave her every penny we had. But there was something she said that day which was very profound for me and has influenced a lot. And she said, you business people, you're wonderful. You create jobs, you do so much. But if you have money in the bank, don't let it sit there doing nothing. Put it to work. Do some good with it. And the time had not yet come for me to start the Elevate Prize, but I didn't want to leave the money sitting in the bank. I'm not sure if Gen 2 or Gen 3 will like this next comment, but I subscribed to Warren Buffett's, where he said, I want to give my kids enough so that they don't have to worry, but not so much that they don't have to work. There's so much that we can do with our resources today rather than have them sitting around for 50 or 100 years. So I'm going to go look at my sheets back here and try to read through my scribbles, if you'll bear with me. Philanthropy and giving back are usually seen as being very noble and selfless. And I agree, it's very noble, but it's not selfless. It's the exact opposite. In my personal experience, it's been extremely self-serving in a most wonderful way. It's exciting, it's profoundly nourishing. It will save our world, and it feeds our soul. And like anything else, the smarter we give, the better the results. At its core, being of service is an act of love. And the metaphysics of love is extraordinary. Everything we put out into the world comes back to us magnified. And this has been a profound realization in my life. In terms of ROI, investing in social impact, and more specifically, for me, social impact leaders, is one of the best investments I've ever made. I'm an entrepreneur at heart. That's been my entire professional life. And the thought of giving $1 and seeing 30% lopped off and then the 70 remaining cents put to work, I want to leverage my resources. What I want is I want my dollar to do the work of 10. I want to multiply my impact. And then I want to inspire others to do more. At the Elevate Prize, it begins by identifying remarkable individuals from all over the world. Smart, passionate, purpose-driven leaders, and giving them our support. For me, they can do a lot more with the money than I can. I want to give it to them. I want to trust in them. I want them to run with the ball. It's not just money. they're all enterprises. And these enterprises need resource and mentoring and marketing and all the stuff that we all know about, and we give them that as well. The second part, where the magic and the multiplication really happens for us, is to shine a bright light on these change makers. And you'll meet some of them in a few minutes. We want to help them attract more opportunities and then be able to take advantage of the opportunities that arise. One of our slogans is, we want to make good famous. We want to ignite a chain reaction of giving back, of problem solving, of doing good on a global scale. And it's exciting. Weirdly, really weirdly, in today's world, while we can all name dozens, at least dozens, of movie stars and athletes and singers, songwriters, and politicians and what have you, very few people can name more than a handful of social impact leaders. These are some of the most incredible people on the planet. And I love movies. I love sports. But why is it that we count the number of balls thrown and caught? We hang on every little twitch of the screen. Why is that? It's not an accident. I don't want to say we're lab rats in a cage, but it's because there are tons of targeted platforms and infrastructure designed so that we will find and follow and care about these media celebrities. The whole game is gamified and addictive. For example, my favorite, maybe someone here knows. Does anyone know who invented the wild card in sports? Whoever did, they were a genius, because it used to be mid-season, most people stopped caring because they knew their team wasn't in the running. Now, everyone continues to go to the games, to watch the TV, to pay up, to care, because their team might be able to make it. We have ads to promote personalities and achievements. There's IMDb to look up. Who looks up IMDb when they're watching a movie at home? Anybody? Okay. I'm not alone, half of you. We can look up the actor's name while we're watching Bridgerton or anything else. My most favorite recently, who watched Serena's last game or highlights from it? Yeah. What a coincidence. No, it's because, there's a machine that made us know about it, care about it. It was an event. We have the Kardashians and an army of influencers. You went back in a time machine 20 years ago, and you were told that some of the most important people on earth would be internet influencers who you know what they do. You go, no way. Snooki, her program ended 10 years ago. Snooki still has 10 million followers on Instagram. And here's a weird one, another great example. So CNN, every year they have their CNN heroes. And they're announced with a lot of fanfare, they're promoted. They pick 10 a year. They've been doing this for 15 years. So they have chosen and highlighted and celebrated 150 CNN heroes. Can anyone here just think of, the names of more than 2 of them?
But he said 2, so.
Yeah. And so to my mind, what's missing is the infrastructure. So with movie stars, we have movie studios and movie, you can go watch the movies, you have TV, you have magazines, you have IMDb, you have all this stuff. It didn't happen overnight. It wasn't designed by one person. It was an evolving collaboration. And why am I talking about this so much? Because it doesn't exist. And if we want to change the world, We have to reach the world. We have to inspire the world. I'm not worried about inspiring you people. You know how to solve problems. You know, you're motivated. But there are problems all over the world. There's no shortage of problems. And it's so empowering for someone to know, to discover that they have agency. That you know, I always picture this, some 9-year-old girl in Pakistan. Don't ask me why. But some little girl, some little boy realizes that they can do something. They can figure it out. They can grab their siblings or their friends. They can fill that pothole. And then they can do something else and something else. And what I want to do, and hopefully do it with some of you or other media companies and philanthropists and foundations, is to collaborate with each other, to start putting the bricks and creating this ecosystem, and start awakening the hero in all of us. So, thank you. I'll hand it back to Carolina, who will introduce you to some amazing social heroes.
All right, so one of the most precious resources we don't have much of is time. So I don't want to take too much time and give it mainly to our leaders who are here with us today. You've heard also, I have to point out that Chad, who you've met a couple times today, is also one of our Elevate Prize winners. So we have him, and also Alexandra Gregore, who's a Stanford grad, also in the audience, who's one of our prize winners. So we're surrounded by these incredible people, not just our 4 panelists. So I'm going to bring these guys up now and start our conversation, because I just want to get into it with them. So Krista Donaldson of Equalize Health, also Stanford grad. Zoe Orchingwa of Emilio, Hee-Jae Lim of Talking Points, and Trisha Prabhu of Rethink. Guys, any orders, fine. So just a quick thing about Elevate Prize Foundation, for those of you who don't know about it. We're a very young foundation, 3 years old, but we're about to name our 3rd cohort of winners, and we look all over the world. And we do this a lot through partnership and collaboration. We co-designed the award, the original award, with MIT. We also partner very strongly with Stanford as well. And partnerships are the DNA, you know, that we're really working from. And this is how we're able to identify and support these incredible leaders that we have here today. We give 10 awards a year. And it's unrestricted cash award of $300,000. The unrestricted part, some of you may not know, is very hard to come by for operational uses to believe in it. But it's also a symbolic gesture that's really important, that signals the fact that we believe that these leaders know better than we do what to do with this money. And that the more you restrict it, the more you're really hamstringing them and keeping them from the ultimate solution that they're seeking, right? But in addition to those 300,000 precious dollars, which everybody needs, especially at the stages that most of our winners are, is 2 years of incredible professional development support. And we do a lot of enterprise building, mentorship, you know, business development that Joe was speaking to earlier. But we also fill a big gaping hole in this sector, which is around getting us to that goal of visibility and giving them, these leaders and their teams, their senior teams that work on with us too, the tools they need to get this visibility. So this is social media support, this is branding, this is communication, this is public speaking. These are obvious things that if you were launching a lipstick, you would have completely on lockdown. But if you are a social enterprise nonprofit, you are given 0 runway to do this, right? And you're not encouraged to do it in any way. And there's all kinds of barriers for that, both financial, psychological, you know, and reasons why these leaders don't step into the light. So for me, having been in this sector for many, many years and been most of my career actually on this side of the fence and running nonprofit organizations, I knew that this could be a completely transformative game changer if we started to make these folks more visible so that they weren't just reliant on the same very limited resources to draw from, right? And the second part of that vision, which is our ultimate long game goal, is to sort of leverage these amazing people to build this fan base so that these billions of people that we hope will start to learn about these awesome folks will then start to feel empowered themselves to start doing good in their own ways. And this has obviously much bigger implications. And that's why it's so important for us to introduce them to you, to give you ways to invest in them. And with that, I want to start talking to you guys and learn more about what you do, because money is a big part of it, and I know that philanthropy, foundations, family offices, they have the best of intentions in investing the way that they do. But historically, philanthropy is very closed, right? It's a Chinese wall. We it's not transparent in any way. And that had a lot of historical reasons, but we don't need that anymore. We don't want that anymore. And now that we understand that it's going to take more than just the money, we also need to change the power structures, start to invite, and we heard this earlier and put really eloquently, these power dynamics need to shift. And a big part of that is proximate leadership, right? Speaking to the people who actually live and breathe these issues every day. And it's not just about giving away the power, it's about sharing the power and opening the dialogue and learning from these leaders, and so that we know how to invest in them the right way. So this proximity is really, really key to us, and the secret sauce that we have of making them very visible. So one thing, you have your bios, you can read up about these 4 extraordinary people. They've all accomplished unbelievable things in their lives. They've been invested in super heavily, but really what it comes down to is the why. So I want to ask each of you the same question, but before you get into the answer of the question, I want to know your why. Why did you do this? What's that proximity you had? What did you see that made it so that you could not turn away one more second? Was it an experience? What was it, right? What is your why? And then the panel question to follow that is, why tech? Why was tech the answer, right? Or the part of the answer that you're utilizing to get to the solution? So I'll start with Hije and talking points.
Yeah, thanks, Carolina. Great to be here. Actually, the much of my why connects back to this place on Stanford campus. So I'll get to that in a little bit. So I am Hije. I'm the founder and CEO of Talking Points. And my why starts with when I moved from Korea. So I was born in Korea. My parents are Korean. And then we moved to England when I was 8. So if you ask me at the reception where I'm from, I will know that you haven't been listening right now. So I moved to England. It was a suburb of London, a very Korean immigrant-heavy community. I moved without knowing a word of English and kind of went to school as an English language learner student. My mom at the time was studying for a graduate degree. She's still not fluent in English, but she became what I would call a parent communicator, kind of spokesperson, go-between, translator for a lot of the Korean immigrant parents that I went to school with. So the parents of the other friends, about 60% of a local kind of elementary school that I went to were Korean immigrant parents. And I really saw kind of this difference that made on me and my sister's education compared to many of the other families and the students who are also my friends. And I just remember very clearly and visually when my mom used to pick me up after school in the parking lot, because there's no school buses in England. All these Korean parents would crowd around our car kind of asking her all the questions, like when was homework due, what is this field trip thing, I got this form, what is that for, and so on. So I kind of really lived through that experience, and contrasting that to Saturdays. And this is for those of you who are scientists in the room, I think is really interesting. So on Saturdays, as good Korean kids do, we went to Korean school. So it's a Korean, temporary school where you learn the Korean curriculum. The teachers are Korean. And it's the same friends, the same parents, but a different school, different curriculum, and different teachers. And I saw the contrast of how my friends' parents would interact with the teachers in the school on Saturdays versus Monday to Friday. So it was a natural A/B experiment that I think I kind of thought of back when I was young. Fast forward, I came to Stanford to go to business school and enrolled in a class called Innovation in Education. It's part of the D School here, right around the corner. And I got the opportunity to go to a school in East Palo Alto, which those of you who know the area is about 5 miles down the road. And I walked in thinking, oh gosh, it's a parent focus group. So the idea was that you would interview parents to understand what their wishes and dreams were for their kids and how to design the school around that. I didn't have a clue about East Palo Alto. I was very new to the area. I walk in on my own. have no idea what to expect, and realize that 27 of the 30 parents who actually took the time to turn up were Spanish speakers. And I fumbled through the parent focus group in my broken Spanish and realized, oh my gosh, this school really reminds me of the local elementary school I went in England. And that just shocked me, because I think growing up outside the US, you kind of think about the US as like, oh my gosh, these like Ivy League schools, the best healthcare, it's the best of the best, it's where innovation happens, and then you're hit with this reality all of a sudden. I think those kind of connection points were already made between my kind of childhood growing up in England and my experience here on Stanford campus or down the road. So that is my why, and just tying that back to the work that I do. So Talking Points, we are an education technology nonprofit, and our mission is to unlock the potential of families in being more engaged in their children's education. So we use technology because we think it's the most scalable, most efficient, effective way to fulfill that mission. We think of technology as a means to an end to the mission, as opposed to good in of itself. And we make a multilingual family engagement platform that allows for families and teachers and school administrators to communicate with each other with human and AI-driven translations. We make our own translation technology that's education context specific, with some of the other kind of education supports to systematically remove some of the barriers in building those meaningful connections that research shows to be really impactful, but not that much blueprint exists out there. So we want to be the leader in family engagement and really kind of making an impact in bridging those education gaps. And to date, we've served about 3 million families annually. And yeah, I'm going to stop there.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm glad you ended with the scope of the success already, because you're in 70,000 schools, right? In over 100 languages already. So we like to find these entrepreneurs when they're on, at a point where they could really scale, right? Because we're not in this to change a few schools. We're in this for systems level change. And you're on your way to that. So we'll get back to that a little bit later. But okay, Tricia, let's talk about Rethink and how you got there.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, so excited to be here, and also hard to follow, so inspiring. So my why really goes back to when I was 13 years old. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, and I was coming home from school one day, and as a trigger warning, I read online a news story about a girl who had been cyberbullied for 1.5 years and died by suicide. And she had received just some of the most unbelievable, unimaginable messages. The world would be a better place without you. I hope you drink bleach and die. You are so ugly. And I remember at 13 years old just being shocked. Like, oh my goodness, this is unacceptable. I had had my own experiences growing up with bullying and harassment, so I knew the issue, I knew what it felt like, but I had not realized until I read that article and started researching the scope of this problem. The fact that in the US alone, 37% of youth aged 12 to 18 have been harassed, and women and minority groups and members of the LGBTQ community are disproportionately impacted. And the thing that really got me angry, being a young person reading this article, was as I started to research, of course, what I wanted to look into was existing solutions. I figured this is a huge problem, it's affecting a lot of people. I'm sure the adults have come up with something creative. I sincerely hope they have. So I started to do some Googling. And what quickly became apparent is a lot of well-intentioned adults, indeed, were trying to come up with solutions, but those solutions were so removed from the reality of what we Gen Zers and digital natives experience. So at the time, the most common solution is what I like to call stop, block, and tell. Right? So the solution is, if you're a victim of cyberbullying, you stop what you're doing, you block the cyberbully, and then you tell a parent. In theory, it sounds like a very logical solution, but in fact, there are 2 key flaws. Flaw number 1, it doesn't work because 90% of teens that are cyberbullied choose not to report the harassment to anyone. We know that for a fact. So telling youth, tell a parent, it sounds like a good idea, but it was not working. Flaw number 2, and this was the thing that really bothered me, is the solution was fundamentally rooted on putting the burden to act on the victim. Right? You've experienced this harassment, and then now as the victim, you have to take action. And I thought, that's the wrong direction. We should be putting the onus to take action on the cyberbully. So I started to do some research looking into behavior, teen behavior, why it is that youth, for instance, might be more inclined to cyberbully or say mean things online. And I stumbled upon this really interesting article that described the teen brain as a car with no brakes. The idea is that when you're 13 years old, 90% of your brain is developed, just this front part remains. And this front part, which I think Julia actually earlier referenced, the prefrontal cortex, is the decision-making center of your brain. And this part itself takes another 13 years. And that's the reason why teens, sometimes we make decisions and we're like, don't know why I did that. I wasn't thinking. I wish I could take it back. And I thought, so we're giving youth this incredible power to say things to all sorts of people online, and we know for a fact that often they'll short circuit, especially in the heat of the moment, and do things that they may regret. Boom, suddenly I had this idea come to my mind. What if I could get a potential cyberbully, someone about to say something mean or offensive, to rethink what they were about to say? What if, as they were about to type something, "You are so ugly," I intervened and provided some friction with the technology that went, whoa, hold on. Are you sure you want to say that? Would that possibly change their behavior? Because if it did, it would tap into this idea that teens often struggle with decision making, and more importantly, it would put the onus on the cyberbully to make the right choice and stop the cyberbullying before it happened, proactively. Now, being a young person, I was skeptical. Who wouldn't be? Will this actually get young people to change their behavior? So at 13, I told my science fair teacher that year, I want to do a little bit more than the 2-week science fair project. I ended up conducting a 9-month study, 1,500 trials that was later acclaimed by Google and MIT, among other institutions, that found that over 93% of the time, youth that received that Rethink alert changed their mind. So, thank you. So that launched the creation of Rethink, which today is a global movement creating technology products that are dedicated to getting teens to be more intentional and educated about the internet. To get to the latter question, why tech? Well, for me, it's because, as I described, what I realized was the problem was the tech that we had, right? The internet as it was designed was so frictionless, right? Just enabling us to say and do things without realizing the impact of our words. And we know for a fact that when you're looking at a screen as opposed to someone's face, it's a lot easier to do and say things that you'd never do in person, right? Because we don't fully understand the same way that we do in person the full weight and consequences of our actions. So I thought, let me create technology to solve a problem technology has created. And since its creation, Rethink is available in 8 international languages, has been acclaimed on stages like Shark Tank, the White House, Forbes, and through partnerships with groups like Scholastic, has been introduced to youth in 134 nations. So I'll leave it there and pass it on.
Yeah, Zoe, I just keep going.
Great. Yeah, so my why started the summer before I was heading into college. I got a call from one of my close friends, and I still remember what he said. He says, "Hey, bro, T just got arrested, and I think he's going to prison." And so taking a step back, I was born in Chicago, Illinois, but to 2 Nigerian immigrant parents, and we moved back to Nigeria. I was supposed to be an anchor baby, but it didn't work out, so we ended up going back. And I spent the first 8 years of my life in Nigeria before my mother won a lottery visa, and we were able to come back to the States. And I like to think that I became American through playing basketball. I had a really thick accent growing up, got bullied a little bit, but on the basketball court, all that matters is whether or not you were good. And so at the time we were living in Hartford, Connecticut, which is one of the rougher cities in Connecticut, and that's where I met most of my good friends, one of them being T. And so after I got that call, it catalyzed a fire in me to try to understand why was T going to prison. This is my close friends. We went to the same schools together, played on the same AAU basketball team. But our home lives were drastically different. Both my parents are college educated. T's brother went to prison, his father went to prison, and he was living in a single parent household. So our trajectories were almost defined at birth. And so at the time, my passion was, I'm gonna go to law school. I'm gonna find a way to try to solve this issue of mass incarceration. And so after undergrad, I went to University of Cambridge to get a master's degree where I was studying criminology. And at the end of my dissertation, I kind of realized that everything I was writing was pretty useless. Most of what I was promoting was policy changes that we've been trying for the last 30 years. So there's 2.3 million people who are incarcerated, 10 million people cycling in and out of the prison system every year. And I knew it's not that policy doesn't work, but it's that it takes a long time to happen. And even when it does work, it can be rolled back. And so I realized that I had to figure out a way to solve a problem within the prison system at scale, a problem that could really transform the lives of folks on the inside. And so I stumbled onto the issue of prison communication. And it seems small, but it's actually one of the most profound problems that we face in criminal justice reform. So right now, there's two predatory companies that charge folks up to $15 a minute to stay connected with their families. And this doesn't only limit family connection, which we know actually significantly reduces recidivism. Some studies show that folks who maintain strong contact with their families are 56% less likely to come back to prison. But this basically regressive tax on poor families also limits resources from getting into prisons because they have to also pay this toll. And so my idea was, it's free. I have family in Nigeria. We text on WhatsApp for free. We have Facebook messengers, all these free communication tools. Yet for the folks who are significantly, severely disadvantaged, we're charging them exorbitant amounts of money to stay connected. So I wasn't technical. I was philosophy undergrad with a criminology degree, but I knew it had to be a tech company because I was like, we have to build a system that's free. And this would be the operating system for so many other transformational products that we could build to solve this problem of mass incarceration. So I spent a lot of time doing a lot of research, and I cold emailed it. When I started up at Yale Law School, I cold emailed an undergrad, Gabe. I saw that he had worked at Facebook, he had built products before, and we got coffee, and I was basically selling him this idea, like, hey, I need a technical co-founder. And this dude's from Brazil. He doesn't know about the US prison system, but I sold him enough that the next day he hits me back and he says, "Oh, let's do it." And so we started going to reentry organizations in New Haven and started interviewing, doing user interviews, talking to folks who've been recently released, trying to understand what were some of the biggest challenges. And we still remember Richard Watkins. He told us, 5 p.m. in prison is either the best moment or the worst because it's mail call. And so he said that the sound of a letter sliding through his door would give him hope for about a week because he knew that someone outside was thinking about him. And so basically, the first product we launched was a mobile app that allowed folks to send letters to incarcerated people. Right now, it doesn't seem like a huge problem, but if you're low income, if you look at some of our user reviews, it's thousands of families across the country thanking us for helping them even send a letter, right? One person that I remember wrote that she doesn't have insurance, so all the money she uses goes to paying for her medical bill, and so this little bit of help actually makes a lot of difference. And so basically what we did, the first product, we took a direct mailing company, an API, we built an app around it, and so folks could send letters, postcard, games, and other content to their loved ones completely free of charge. We scaled that to over 1 million users, but we knew that was just the beginning, that real-time communication was critical because not only can families stay together, but mental health clinicians, academics can actually reach into prison and deliver these critical resources. So to take a step back, some of us who may be conservative may ask, why are you spending your time trying to help these people? Like, these people have committed heinous crimes. 50% of folks in state prisons committed violent offenses. But when you look at the real data, you find that 50% of folks in prison had no income 8 years prior to their incarceration. And a year prior, it jumps to 80%. So we often talk about race as a big issue, but poverty is the single biggest driver of incarceration. And we have people sitting in prison for 2.5 years on average. So it's a critical time for us to provide them those amazing resources to make sure they don't come back to prison. So since that first app, we've built a entire communication platform, so video communication, e-messaging, and voice calls. And we're also going to be launching our educational platform. And so one of the biggest challenges we had with fundraising was that people understood that this duopoly dominated the space. They don't only dominate the space, but they actually pay kickbacks to the prison systems. So how do you get them to give up on this kickback and embrace better technology that's actually going to improve the lives of those who are in prison? So to summarize, it had to be technology because in the 20th century, I think the law was the greatest instrument of social change. But in the 21st century, I believe it's technology. It's scalable. It's cheaper, and that's my why. And so Emilio is. We are soon to be the third largest prison communication education provider in the country, and we are supporting thousands of prisoners in Maine, Colorado, and Iowa. One of those states is actually a kickback state that was willing to forego the millions of dollars they were receiving in kickbacks because they knew that the long-term benefits for their population and their staff was so much greater. But yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm Krista Donaldson of Equalize Health, the founder. I'm going to make my why a bit participatory. How many of you are parents? Raise your hands, great. And how many of you had a jaundiced baby?
Oh yeah, I did.
Jaundiced
jaundiced.
baby, a baby with jaundice, neonatal jaundice. Okay. I see a few hands. You're a little bit under the rate. About 60% of all babies have some degree of jaundice, and about 12% need to be treated. And I got into the business I'm in. Our organization, we develop very high quality, affordable, and contextually appropriate medical devices. But my why is that I met an Indian doctor who was placing, this is about 13 years ago, was placing babies out in the sun. And for those of you who are familiar with phototherapy, it's blue light, it's intense blue light, it shines through the baby's skin, it breaks down the bilirubin that causes the jaundice. It's time sensitive though. If a baby with severe jaundice is not treated, it will suffer irreversible brain damage or die. And so this doctor was placing babies out in the sun, and you have to imagine many of these babies are premature, so a child who can literally fit in your hands. And their skin is very thin, and they're out there in the UV. And I was trained as a product designer and an engineer here. And it was unfathomable that blue light, which is such a simple, seemingly simple solution, was not available. And the reason it wasn't available, because existing phototherapy was very expensive. And it wasn't just expensive in terms of the capital cost, the cost of the device, which at the time was about $3,500 US if you were to purchase one here. It could cost up to $10,000 if you were purchasing one in Nairobi or in Kampala or in other places where the markets were not as well developed. But the real issue was the consumable costs. They all used bulbs that burned out. And the bulbs would burn out after 3 to 6 months. You needed 6 of these bulbs, and it wasn't just the cost of these bulbs, which range from $20 in Delhi per bulb to $200 per bulb in Kampala. So I'll let you do the math, but it adds up very quickly for hospitals that cannot afford, they don't have big operating budgets. And as a result, children were even being put out into the sun. They weren't getting any treatment at all, or what we were often seeing were homemade devices. And homemade devices, as an engineer or a designer, especially one who's user-centered, which we talk a lot about at Stanford, and those of you who are going to be here Monday, there's that great session, it looks like, on human-centered design. But it's really about understanding what are the needs of the users, the clinicians in the context. So our first product was phototherapy using LEDs, and we were able to bring it to market at $500. And to give you a sense of the scale now, it's in over 79 countries, and we've treated 1.5 million babies. And we're just getting started. Thank you. And this is an issue that many of us don't think about. And Joe, I was so appreciative that you described the hospital in Kolkata, because that's very similar to many of the hospitals we work in, where the nurses are overburdened, there are electrical surges. And when I should go back to nurses being overburdened. If you were to take a neonatal intensive care unit here at Stanford, you would have 1 nurse per baby. If you were to go to one in a rural hospital in India, and this is a large government hospital that has a functioning NICU, you might see one nurse per 8 babies if you're lucky. More typically, you're going to see one nurse per 13 babies to 15 babies. And the devices we design now, the medical devices we design now, are very much based on the Western model here, which is like you've got a nurse hovering around. So think of a CPAP device, that helps babies breathe, or some of us with COP at night. But it assumes that we have resources, but many of the hospitals in the world do not. And as a result, 3 million women and children are dying every year from easily preventable conditions. So at Equalize Health, we work on maternal and newborn health. And what we do is we look at issue areas where the technology is already very well known. This gets to the technology aspect. And then we develop it. We make it user-centered. We really understand what the local conditions are. We understand what the local markets are. And then we find commercial partnerships. So we'll develop the technology, we'll design it, we'll produce the device, and then we find commercial partners. And then they help us distribute to where the product is needed. And we leverage the market for scale. So we are structured as a nonprofit, but most of our buyers don't know that. What they know is that they're getting a very affordable, high-quality device. And this is the model, because we want to bring industry into the markets that they are not now able to serve, but we hope they will serve in future, and we're part of that bridge to do that. And so we've worked on phototherapy. We have a whole suite of products around that. We did a prosthetic knee that we ended up spinning off. We're working on CPAP now, which I talked a little bit about. And we're working on several products for postpartum hemorrhage, which is when women bleed to death after giving birth. And it's the major killer of women at birth. But again, I'm very hopeful because I see incredible young engineers and designers and local innovators who have phenomenal ideas. And the industry is changing. 10 years ago when I called some of the big med tech companies, they would not take my call. And now they will take our call because they do want to partner, because they recognize that these emerging markets are the markets of the future. And they're willing to invest. And so that's where we are right now.
Wow, it is amazing. And you can see why I think I have the best job in the world, right? So I do. And we get to do this every year. And how much time do I have left? Because I want to be cognizant of that. Who could tell me, Bob?
6, 7 minutes.
No. That's it? Okay.
We'll be briefer.
On that. Okay. So I'm going to quickly say, because I want them to have the last word, that we know all these family offices are represented here today, and not every family office, or not the head of every family office, every Joe in the room, has the ability or the capacity or the interest to put together an entire foundation, because this is a huge lift. It's a huge lift to put together the application process, the vetting process, this finding these folks all over the world, selecting them right, and then spending years and years investing in them and building the trust that we've built with these guys to be able to continue to make these solutions viable and bring them to scale. So I want to invite anyone in the room who's interested in joining us, because although Joe has amazing resources and incredible generosity and the biggest heart I know, he can't do it alone and he shouldn't do it alone. And for those of you who want to do it with us, we are developing a way to partner with other family foundations and people who are interested in potentially underwriting prizes or coming in with us, because we have that capacity. We have the best team in the world leading this prize and the other initiatives that we have to help make good famous. And so I want you to find me if you're interested in doing that, because I know how to do this. And my team knows how to do this. And these are 4 extraordinary individuals, but there's many more of them among our cohorts and many more to come. So I want to say that because some of you may be interested in that. And then finish out with each of you maybe talking a little bit about, because there is financial capital in this room. And I think for a lot, I've raised money for so many years from many wealthy individuals, and many times there's a few barriers to getting that money. And one of them is lack of specificity. What is it that you really need to move the dial? What is it that's going to move this ball right down the field for you? And sometimes the imagining of what that number is very different than what it actually is. So I want to get just really brass tacks with each of you to talk quickly, because we don't have a lot of time. What is the thing that you're trying to raise for? And what difference will that make to the solution that you are after? And we'll go backwards this time. We'll start with Krista.
Sure. Thank you for asking this. So we are raising a catalytic fund at Equalize Health. The model right now is that we do earn revenue from our products and we put it into future product development, but it's very shoestringy, and that's why we bring in philanthropy as well. And so a catalytic fund will enable us to jumpstart with multiple products that will increase the revenue back to the organization and make us more self-sustaining. We have several projects which I already mentioned related to CPAP and postpartum hemorrhage. The products are on their way to be developed. Some of them will be starting to come to market later this year. We have commercial partnerships lined up, and we're raising a total fund of $15 million. We've raised $4 million already. So if you could please, if you're interested in health equity, please take a look at our website. It's equalizehealth.org. And the other thing I would say is if you're more on the less risk side, we're also really interested in support through results-based financing, because we have so many incredible projects that are happening now. And we have an impact dashboard too that I would say if you go to our website, take a look. But please come talk to me. Thank you.
Thank you. So?
Yeah, so we're raising a growth round, 19 million. We've raised 10 of that so far from folks like Reid Hoffman, Arnold Ventures, Schmidt Futures being one of them as well. So our goal is to reach 1 million incarcerated people, to be able to provide each and every one of them free communication and access to educational platform. We think that this is going to be one of the most profound ways to make sure people don't come back to prison. If we want to have sustainable decarceration, we have to make sure that folks get the resources that they lacked prior to their incarceration. And so, yeah, that funding will go to us building out the rest of our educational platform and trying to scale across the country. Our two competitors are billion-dollar companies with hundreds of folks on their sales team, and our sales team comprises of myself and 2 other people. And we've already taken 3 out of 50 states, and are close to signing a contract that would get us in all 50 states and 4% of the entire prison population. So yeah, any help you can provide would be amazing. Thank you.
And change a lot of lives.
And change a lot of lives,
Yeah.
for sure.
Tricia.
So the funding that we want right now is for 2 key initiatives. One is taking Rethink international, so taking Rethink global. In the early years of Rethink, we've been super focused here in the US because that's where cyberbullying has been a pretty well-known issue here in the US and in Europe. But especially with COVID, there's been a huge acceleration of technology and internet use around the world. And with that, unfortunately, has also come a rise in online harassment and cyberbullying. So right now, we're looking for funds to support partnerships that we're spearheading with international NGOs, where we work with these groups to roll out our technology and our digital literacy curriculum, which is K through 12, grade specific, teaches youth the concepts they need to know to be responsible digital citizens. We're looking for funding to support those partnerships so we can take Rethink to new regions. Right now, we're focused on the Middle East, and we have Elevate, once again, supporting us and doing that work. And it's awesome because we're not just tackling cyberbullying with those partnerships, we're actually curating and tailoring the technology and the curriculum to local problems. So for instance, in the Middle East, we're focusing on peace building and tolerance. So there's potential to make impact in so many different ways and reach millions of youth. The other key initiative is partnering with phone carrier companies and platforms. So right now we're looking for the funds to expand our team and grow out our infrastructure so that we can pursue potential partnerships with these big platforms that can allow us to make Rethink just the standard for the internet, right? How cool would it be if instead of having to download this app, this is just how the internet is? That's the vision that I have in my mind. But in order to do that, we need to have the infrastructure, the team, the resources, not just to make those connections, but to be able to deliver on those partnerships in a way that's big. So that's really what's in our future, and whatever support you can offer would be incredible and an amazing opportunity to change lives.
Yeah, we're reinvesting in Rethink and have a matching grant out there for this Middle East work. So it's I think a couple $100,000 you're looking to match.
Yes.
So it's it's doable for sure. And one quick thing before Jay goes that I think is important to understand about so many nonprofits, the way that funding tends to go is that out of every $100 funded to a nonprofit, typically only 12 to 15 of those dollars are available for overhead. That's everything, all overhead, including marketing and comms, which is why all that stuff is always the first thing to go out the door. And that's impossible to live up to, right? And these are people-powered organizations. Everything is overhead for the most part. I mean, Krista develops products, but it's really people-powered, and you have to be able and open to funding that. And for some reason, this is the way the funding model has gone for so long, but understanding that, and that's very much tied to why this unrestricted funding is so game-changing. So I think that's really important to understand. So, Jay, please.
Yeah, so we've grown about 10x over the last 18 months in terms of the scale. And I think the moment is now in solving for family engagement to kind of really bridge that education gap. So, for example, the Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, put out a whole policy agenda earlier this year, and he put family engagement at the top priority. And we believe that we are the only player in the market serving underserved multilingual families to be able to really build connections with schools, to really bridge that learning gap that's only grown through COVID. So we believe that the moment is now. In terms of our fundraising, we are looking to close an $8 million fundraising gap by the end of this calendar year. And then soon after that, we'll be launching around a $50 million growth fund to be able to really scale our operations. Our immediate goals are to serve 5 million families nationally this school year, as well as a lot of the product development and R&D that comes with naturally evolving tech platform that really serves the needs of our communities. We've also grown our team from about 10 people in March 2020 to 80 right now. So a lot of the foundational infrastructure needs a lot of building and support and care and love. So those are some of the investment areas that we're looking to seek. And I think what's really beautiful about what Carolina said around general operating support, I do think that family offices and family foundations are just so suited to giving immediate but general operating support. So if I think about the funders of Talking Points who are really leaning heavily into that general operating support, they're all family offices. I'm thinking Bulmer Group, Overdeck Family Foundation, the Peary family that are really close to the campus, Schmidt Futures, it's Eric Schmidt's family foundation, and many, many more, Scott Cook and Signe Otsby. So I do think the family offices are just so well suited to that patient, high social return on investment capital that can really trust entrepreneurs and kind of help us be nimble around capital deployment. So that's the last plug for general operating that we're so grateful for.
Earlier this morning we heard from NextGen family office members, and Lou was her name, right? She said, something really interesting about her family's wealth was built on, these very old ways, mining, these kind of things that all of that's changing, right? The way that these families are making money is changing very much. So then really the way they're deploying philanthropy needs to change also, right? And this what this next gen is really exciting to me about, is because we can look at different ways of structuring philanthropy and thinking about how to connect. And I think the next generation is really looking to have a deep and meaningful relationship with leaders like this. And I'm just so humbled by the work that all of you are doing. I know we're probably over, but I want to just give the last minute and the last word to the man, the myth, the legend, Joe, if you'd like to say anything.
I was sitting next to Bob Bernstein the whole time, and he kept saying, I want to buy stock in them. I want to buy stock in them. You guys should band together an IPO. Carolina is the person who put our unbelievable team together, and she's just remarkable. So thank you, Carolina. Over 100 years ago, Andrew Carnegie wrote this essay called The Gospel of Wealth. And one of the impactful things he said there, he says, if you're going to give money away, don't wait until you die. Give it away now so you can enjoy what happens and bask in the glory. And I have had so much fun with the Elevate Prize. I mean, I get to hang out with these people, and there's more of them. It's wonderful. So it's a wonderful journey. If, as Carolina said, if we can help any of you in any way, either by working together or just answering your questions or directing you to any resources, we'd love the opportunity.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.